Hello and welcome to another episode of Gemstone Mine. I'm John, and today I'm going to try something a little bit different. I want to do a bit more of an unscripted, kind of off-the-cuff episode, a little bit different from how I usually approach things, where I kind of script everything that I do, and I wanted to try something a little bit different. I would like to use this opportunity to kind of talk about some cards that may have slipped through the cracks or are cards that are particularly impactful, and try to unpack what they mean for the format of Commander overall, as well as specific metagames like CDH, more casual tables, and just kind of look at the possibilities that these cards represent. As I said, this is going to be more of an unscripted episode. I'm not really sure what I'm going to call these yet if they catch on. Maybe something like Uncut Gemstones or Spelunking, or maybe just revive the old Hidden Gems episodes that I've done in the past. I'm not sure. Leave us a comment on YouTube. Let us know what you guys are thinking. Anyway, the card I want to talk about today is a card from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, which is Grazilaxx, Illithid Scholar. 1 blue for a legendary creature horror. This is a 3/2 with, whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, you may return it to its owner's hand, and whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. Now, the immediate comparison that I think we can look at with this is Tymna the Weaver. So Tymna lets you pay life in order to draw cards off of the number of opponents who were dealt combat damage. Grazilaxx is worded in a very similar way, where whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. So at most, in a full pod, if you're managing to connect with each opponent, you're going to be able to draw 3 cards. Unlike Tymna, you're not going to be drawing multiple cards in this way off of one opponent. However, you're also, unlike Tymna, if Grazilaxx is going to be your commander, you're not going to be able to partner up and get access to a lot of colors. As a commander, Grazilaxx is limiting you only to blue. Grazilaxx's other ability is also kind of interesting. Whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, you may return it to its owner's hand, essentially allowing you to force the decision on your opponents of, do you want to block and give me this creature back to my hand to cast again, potentially using an enter the battlefield trigger over, or will you let me through to deal combat damage to you and draw a card as a result? There's some interesting tension here, as you can potentially play with a lot of interesting different enter the battlefield effects at different levels of mana value in order to generate different types of effects. You probably also want to be running a decent number of evasive creatures to have a steady stream of card draw coming from your commander. Now, when I was first thinking about this card, I actually assumed that Grazilaxx was a horror wizard, but Grazilaxx is in fact just a horror, so it's a little bit harder to take advantage of wizard synergies that you might otherwise use in a blue deck. So if we were going to look at Grazilaxx as a commander, what we can do is, going back to Scryfall, we can use some search terms to try to look for the keywords that we're really interested in. So Grazilaxx, we want to have some form of evasion. Why don't we start with flying? And we'll, quote, enter the battlefield. We want these to be creatures. And for the commander color identity, we want blue only. And a quick Scryfall search shows 185 cards. Now, one of the ones that I was thinking of when I first saw this is actually this card here, Augury Owl, of which there have been multiple variations printed, these 1/1 flying birds for 1 that allow you to scry when it enters the battlefield. There have been similar ones that I think came out in Portal. Let's try to add the requirement of the name including owl. So we have Augury Owl, we have Spire Owl from back in Urza's Saga. When it ETBs, you'll get the top 4 cards of your library, put them back in any order. You can't scry to the bottom, but it's another way to kind of set up the top of your library. Sage Owl is identical, basically a reprint of Spire Owl. Owl Familiar is the one from Portal that I was thinking of. This one is instead, you get to draw a card, then choose and discard a card, which is kind of nice. So a lot of potential card selection on evasive bodies, which is kind of cool. one way to take advantage of that. There's a couple of other fairly cheap flyers that you could take advantage of. Cloudkin Seer, which enters the battlefield to draw a card. There are some bigger enter the battlefield effects as well, like Draining Welk, potentially being a counter spell, which makes me think also Venser, the Sojourner. Venser, Shaper, Savant, the 4-mana creature Venser, could be useful in that regard too. There are a couple of fairies that have interesting enter the battlefield effects. Nothing really jumping out to me so far. Fairy Seer is another card. Actually sees some play in Yuriko decks as an evasive attacker. And Scry 2 with a 1/1 flyer for 1 is nothing to really sneeze at. That's kind of nice. Foul Watcher is probably more of a limited card. This one is a 1/2 flyer for 2, which gives you a Surveil, and then Delirium to make it a 2/2 flyer if you have Delirium set up. There's a lot of potential options here. Mausoleum Wanderer is actually pretty powerful if we were to go Spirit Tribal. But even just being able to sacrifice it to counter an instant or sorcery spell is not too bad. Good old Muldrifter. That one is a staple of a lot of Blink decks. Pestermite, maybe potentially put that in a shell that includes red for a Kiki Jiki combo. Yeah, there's a lot of potential options here that could go along very well with what we're trying to do with Grazilaxx in the command zone. Other things we could potentially look at to modify our search. Instead of enters the battlefield, we'll keep that actually. Instead of flying, let's say can't be blocked, which is the modern templating, I believe. Yes. We have 19 cards that have ETB effects that also say they can't be blocked. We have Azure Fleet Admiral. 4 mana to become the Monarch. You get a 3/3, and it can't be blocked by creatures the Monarch controls. So if you were to attack the Monarch, you get the Monarch back immediately. If you attack somebody else, you return the Admiral to your hand, and then play it again to become the Admiral again. 4 mana is a lot of mana in Modern Commander, but it's not too bad. We have another Monarch card in Keeper of the Keys, which I think is actually very good. This one is a 4/4 for 5, a human rogue mutant. When Keeper of the Keys enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch. And at the beginning of your upkeep, if you're the Monarch, creatures you control can't be blocked this turn. So that's pretty darn cool as a way to make sure you can connect with your little creatures with Grazilaxx. And if you do lose the Monarch, you can reset it. So for 5 mana, it's not especially powerful. Definitely won't see play in CDH, but it is something that could be pretty cool at a more casual table. So those are kind of our evasive threats. Other possible forms of evasion, there is Skulk, and we have exactly one card that does this, a 1/3 that can put a creature to sleep for a turn, and Skulk. Not really sure how useful that actually would be, so I think that is out. Okay, so there's some cool stuff here. Now, the other place we could potentially look at Grazilaxx, outside of being a commander, would be to include it as part of a deck. I think the most obvious combination would probably be with green, as that gives us a little bit more in the way of a creature package. Historically in CEDH, one of the reasons Tymna became so powerful was combining her with Thrasios gave access to a ton of green mana dorks, who could then be used after your initial boost in ramp to attack with to be able to draw additional cards. Grazilaxx could play a similar role if it was included in the 99. Now the downside of the 99 is that it's a little bit hard to tutor Grazilaxx out consistently. Green is one potential way to do it because green is so good at tutoring up creatures. We could look at things like Eldritch Evolution, which would allow us to trade a 1-drop mana dork for Grazilaxx potentially as early as turn 2 and have that game plan going. Since we're already in Simic, we could look at Neoform as another potential way to do it, although we would need a 2-drop to make that happen. Potentially then we could have something like Thrasios in the command zone, and if our game plan revolved around Grazilaxx, we could just Neoform Grazilaxx out using Thrasios as our creature that we sacrifice. So that is a potential reason to really think that green-blue as a base for a deck with Grazilaxx in the 99 is potentially cool. We get all those dorks that we could either turn sideways and use to draw additional cards off Grazilaxx. If our hand is full and we want to cast cards, we could use those dorks to cast some of the cards that we've drawn with Grazilaxx. If they do get blocked, we can just reset them, return them to our hand, and kind of get around the danger of sending dorks into attack where they could just be chumped and destroyed pretty easily. So that's actually seeming kind of cool. Now, the real power of Grazilaxx comes when you are resetting creatures who have powerful enter the battlefield effects. And if we're talking CEDH, I don't think there's anything more powerful than Dockside Extortionist at the moment. We have the 1/2, 1 in a red, Goblin Pirate that ETBs to create X treasures, where X is the number of artifacts and enchantments your opponents control. I think in most cases, a creature with this powerful of an enter the battlefield effect is probably just going to get through and essentially be unblockable to draw you an additional card each turn. Some of the more interesting cases may be with cards like Spellseeker, which is going to be open in all of our colors no matter what we wind up doing with Grazilaxx. 2 and a blue for a 1/1 creature human wizard. When Spellseeker enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an instant or sorcery card with a CMC or a mana value of 2 or less, reveal it, and then put it into your hand. There are probably some cool things that we could do with that. Why don't we take a look to see what we could do, combining Spellseeker with Grazilaxx. So let's say can't be, let's not be too hasty, can't be blocked as the text. So we want either an instant or a sorcery. We want it to be available in blue, and we want the mana value to be less than or equal to 2. And we're going to set it up so it is type instant or sorcery. Gives us a few potential options here. Total of 8 cards in blue give us a creature who would be unblockable, multiple creatures who can be unblockable, a little bit of a buff with distortion strike. Couple of interesting options, nothing super powerful that I can see offhand. Honestly, I think the most powerful thing you can do at that point would be just to use Spellseeker to get any number of the classic Spellseeker lines, going for Ephemerate, for example, to reset your Spellseeker. All potential good options, or just trying to go for the win if you happen to be in Dimir at least, going for your Demonic Consultation or your Tainted Pact at that point. Still, it does allow you to get new use out of creatures who are kind of dead once they've entered the battlefield, if we're looking at this for high power or CEDH, whether in the command zone or in the 99. Another thing to note here is that Grazilaxx does not say whenever another creature you control becomes blocked, it's whenever any creature you control becomes blocked. So theoretically, you can send itself in for damage, and if it became blocked and you just wanted to get it back, you can return it to your hand. The tension there being that if Grazilaxx is blocked, you have to return it to your hand before you would get to draw cards from the combat damage trigger. A little bit of a trade-off, but potentially pretty cool. Another thing to take note of here, and something that's kind of forward-looking with this card, would be to actually look at some of the cards from the upcoming Kawagama Neon Dynasty, because we got this card. Satoru Umazawa. Oh god, I cannot pronounce Japanese names. Satoru Umazawa. This is 1 blue-black for a legendary creature human ninja with 2/4, and whenever you activate a ninjutsu ability, look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. This ability triggers only once each turn, and each creature in your hand has ninjutsu for 2 blue-black. Again, ninjutsu is an effect where if you have a creature which is unblocked, you can activate ninjutsu during that declare blocker step to return that creature to your hand and replace it with the creature that has ninjutsu. The flavor being, oh, it was a ninja all along sneaking in. I think we're going to get a lot of support from ninjas in this upcoming Neon Dynasty set, and Grazilaxx could potentially be a powerful enabler in that deck, especially when you could potentially use him as an engine to reuse powerful blue-black enters the battlefield effects over and over and over by resetting them back to your hand and then ninjutsuing them back out. If you have enough mana as well, and you happen to be in 3 colors, you can set up some powerful loops with cards like Sakashima's Student. Ooh, I spelled Sakashima right on my first try. It's pretty impressive. So this is a creature human ninja for 2 blue with ninjutsu 1 and a blue. It is 0/0, but you may have Sakashima's Student enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except that it's a ninja in addition to its other creature types. So if you were to have Sakashima's Student switch places with a Dockside Extortionist, you can get a loop going where you generate an infinite amount of treasure. In order to do this, though, you either have to have the Dockside Extortionist in play on your side, which means you couldn't do it in that blue-black ninja deck we were talking about a moment ago. I have made this work when other opponents are playing Dockside Extortionist in CEDH with a Yuriko deck, and won that way with generating infinite treasures. You do not have to actually control the creature for Sakashima's Student to be able to become a copy of it, which is pretty darn cool, and it only takes a handful of mana to go infinite with off of Dockside Extortionist. I really think that Grazilaxx may have been a plant to use for a blue-black ninjas deck in Standard that Wizards is planning in Neon Dynasty, and Grazilaxx could fit very well into this type of deck, where you are going to be playing creatures that want to get through, probably with Saboteur-type effects that we've seen on ninjas previously. So type ninja. In the past, through the original Modern Horizons and our original trip to Kawigama, we got a number of creatures, and typically when they do their thing, they're going to do it when they are dealing combat damage to a player. So there's a lot of powerful things, some more powerful than others, that you could potentially be doing in this ninja deck that happens to carry a horror around with you. The last thing I think I want to mention with Grazilaxx that comes to mind as we're talking about this is that it is a horror. So I don't remember the name of the card, but it came from, I believe, the Crimson Vow Commanders. We had... Was it Crimson Vow? Let's see. There it is. Umbrus, Fear Manifest, 3 blue-black for a legendary creature, Nightmare Horror. Umbrus, Fear Manifest is a 1/1. It gets +1/+1 for each card your opponents own in exile. And whenever Umbrus or another Nightmare or Horror enters the battlefield under your control, target opponent exiles a card from their library until they exile a land card. So Grazilaxx can act as a source of card advantage in this type of deck. Black doesn't have any direct creature tutors, but it does have a lot of ways to get that Grazilaxx out of your deck. In blue and black, we have access to transmute cards as well. And we're going to be looking for ones with a mana value of 3. So we have Demir Machinations, a sorcery that is a little bit of upside, not great. Drift of Phantasms gives us a 0/5 flying defender. Also not great, but playable at least. And then we get Perplex as a 3-mana counterspell that could also potentially be a transmute. So 3 ways at relatively low cost to go get Grazilaxx out of your library, in addition to all of the other black tutors that you would have access to. In addition, if you wind up playing an Reanimator type deck, you can use Entomb, Buried Alive. You can't use Unmarked Grave with Grazilaxx, since Grazilaxx is a legendary creature. But there you go. There's a couple of potential ways that you could use Grazilaxx in some decks. I am potentially looking at it in a go wide Dimir deck, where just being able to connect with a few zombie tokens and then drawing some cards off of it could be a good use of it. I'd also like to use some more powerful ETB zombies like Grey Merchant of Asphodel as a potential payoff, and forcing opponents between letting me draw a card and draining big could be a nice bit of an intersection between what Grazilaxx is allowing the deck to do and what the deck wants to do in general. So there it is. That's a nice little unscripted episode about Grazilaxx. Just me spitballing ideas and thinking off the top of my head. I hope you enjoyed this kind of rambly look inside of how my brain works when I'm analyzing a card. Let us know what you think. Did I miss some things with Grazilaxx? Have you used this card? Let us know on YouTube, where you can leave us a comment. We are Gemstone Mine Podcast. You can add us on Twitter, where we are at GemstoneMineMTG, or you can send us an email, where we are gemstoneminepodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, I'm John, and this is Gemstone Mine.